It is a new day. Light begins to dawn. Rays of life, giving energy, break forth in glorious splendor. It is the dawning of a new day in consciousness. The light of illumination begins to break upon you from within. You are a spiritual being, a light being. You have been endowed with 12 cosmic powers, 12 gifts of light: faith, strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, enthusiasm, release, life. Accept your 12 powers. Burst forth into the dawning of a new way of life. Welcome your caring companions, David Williamson, Doctor of Ministry, Gaylyn Williamson, Psychotherapist, and Robert Knapp, Medical Doctor, as they help you to have a deeper sense of understanding yourself and others. Come and learn the true power of understanding.
Our power of understanding helps us to make sense out of all the other powers with which we are endowed and out of which we are forming our life. The medieval Catholic mystic Meister Eckhart wrote, "The seed of God is in us all. Given a hard-working farmer, it will thrive and grow up to God whose seed it is, and accordingly its fruits will be God nature. Pear seeds grow into pear trees, nut seeds into nut trees," and Meister Eckhart said, "and God seeds into God." Knowledge of potential maturity then exists within a seed. Inherent within the seed is the template or instructions that know what the tree is meant to be and how it can get to be that fulfillment. So likewise, knowledge of potential maturity exists within a human being. Just as a seed for a plant or a tree somehow knows what it will someday become, so also do human beings have within us a pattern, a basic knowledge of what and how we are intended to express via our 12 powers. As we grow and mature, we are like a tree that has 12 major branches, one for each of the powers, including faith, love, strength, wisdom, understanding, and all the rest. When all of these branches or powers are well developed, strong in balance with all the other branches or powers, then we are healthy and well balanced. We are expressing our wholeness. If people are basically good, then, if we have the seed of God within us, as Meister Eckhart said, that grows and expresses by way of the 12 powers, then how can we understand why people do such terrible things? We often look around and wonder, how can this happen? How can people do the violent acts that they do? How can a Jewish teenager, Anne Frank, caught in the midst of the Holocaust in World War II, living in a hidden attic in Holland, write in her diary, "I still believe that people are really good at heart"? Maybe what has been called sinful nature is actually the result of cutting off growth in much the same way that a tree is badly pruned. A healthy, balanced, mature tree might look like this. But if too many branches are cut off of one side, however, then there may be so much growth on the other side that the tree ends up being out of balance. The life forces flow into the other branches and the tree is strained and has bad problems. So growth is frustrated and directed mainly into certain branches. The life force in the tree that is flopped over and strained still has the same growth-seeking potential. The inherent pattern in the seed is the same. The life energy is the same. But we see the organic pattern being misdirected. For example, without the counterbalance and right use of love and wisdom and life, which have been cut off of the tree of life, the powers of strength, imagination, and will may become excessively developed and take over. In this case, we may get a person who is cruel, dictatorial, domineering, or abusive. In another instance, if a person is loving, imaginative, and enthusiastic, but lacks wisdom, strength, and power, this person may not be able to stand up for himself or herself. He or she may get used or abused, dumped on, scammed, or drained, and this individual may be a pushover or be taken advantage of by users. So ideally, our divinity or fulfillment is the balanced coordination and expression of all our spiritual powers from the God seed within us. Now we understand.
It's so beautiful to look into a calm lake and see the reflection of a tree as it grows next to the bank. When the water is rough or churning, you can no longer see the image. If the wind is blowing and you throw something into the lake, you would not be able to see the image of the tree. There's an old Chinese saying, "Muddy water let stand becomes clear." Many times when people come to me in counseling, they're all churned up. Their emotions are at a high pitch. They feel as though they are on sensory overload, taking in so much from what is happening around them. Many times they're struggling to make a decision in the midst of this turmoil, and it's impossible. Just as it's impossible to see the reflection of the tree when the water is all stirred up. The beauty of the tree cannot be seen in churning water, and the understanding and guidance of our heart, mind, and spirit cannot come clearly while the mind is all mixed up. Understanding can be increased as we practice becoming still. Sometimes the best answer is to take no action, to let things calm down around you, to allow your senses to take a rest, and let your mind become quiet. A quiet mind can see more clearly what needs to be done. Remember, muddy water let stand becomes clear. If you're feeling confused and you need greater understanding, practice stilling your mind. You can do this by simply holding a single word in your mind, such as peace. Repeat the word over and over, breathing deeply and exhaling with each repetition. You may want to light a candle and just watch the dancing flame. Let your mind simply rest and gently hold the focus on the flame. Practice going into a prayer state where you can give your worries over to a higher power. The Rabbi Jesus illustrated how to do this when he looked at the troubled waters. He was in a boat with his friends, and there was a great storm, and the wind was blowing and tossing the boat about, and his friends were all anxious and afraid. And so Jesus said to the waters, and perhaps to his friends, "Peace, be still. Peace, be still." We can say this as a calming affirmation to ourselves until our mind becomes calm and uncluttered and clear.
How do we come to understand ourselves and the world around us? Well, in large measure, we do this by gathering a vast amount of information with our 5 physical senses, with our eyes and our ears, our nose, our taste bud, and our touch receptors. And we gather all of this data and then we analyze it and we make sense of it. We understand it. Each of our physical senses converts a different type of stimuli into a nerve signal that travels to the brain. For example, here, as you can see in this model of the eye, the light comes in through the cornea and through the lens, and it registers on the back of the eye called the retina. And the retina converts that light into nerve signals that travel along the optic nerve and go all the way up to our brain. Now, it's not until it gets all the way back here to the back of the brain in the area called the visual cortex that we actually see something, that we come to understand it. Our eyes gather about 80% of the total information that we gather with all of our 5 senses. So we read and study, we watch TV and movies and videos, and we obtain data from the internet. We also are inspired by what we see in nature. Do you know that patients in hospital rooms that have a window looking out on nature actually heal faster and leave the hospital sooner than those patients in rooms whose windows look out on a blank wall? Now, how about our hearing? Our ears convert sound waves into nerve impulses. The sound waves enter our external ear and vibrate the tympanic membrane. which transfers the vibrations along 3 small bones to the inner ear. And in there, fluid waves are converted into nerve signals that travel via the auditory nerve and other nerves to the brain. Now again, it's not until the nerve impulses actually reach up here in the hearing center in the brain that we begin to hear something and to understand what it means. Sound has such tremendous healing potential. When we listen to a moving song, we hear the message in a whole different way than when we just see and read the lyrics of the song. We hear it and we deeply understand it. Children who listen to Mozart actually have an increase in their IQ, their intelligence. To increase our own understanding, we always want to listen carefully and lovingly to what people are saying. And then we can reply, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I understand. Our sense of touch likewise can convey healing energies. If we touch people with love, that love gets sensed physically. People feel it in a tangible way, and they realize at a deep core level that they're not alone or separated or unloved. Some holistic physicians even recommend their clients give and receive 4 hugs per day. Now that sounds like a great idea to me. Understanding obviously does not rely only on our 5 physical senses. As glorious as they may be in providing us information about our physical world, deeper, higher, more expansive awareness and knowledge often come in times of quiet contemplation, reflection, self-analysis, and meditation, when we deliberately are not paying attention to our physical senses or to our common way of thinking about things. In these moments, we come to know more about ourselves and why we are here. And then we are truly wise and understanding.
Understanding is never final. We may see the light and exclaim at times, now I understand. However, we are always evolving and growing in wisdom and stature. So the doubt is not necessarily a sin, and certainty is not always a virtue. The word quest obviously is stimulated and driven by the word question, with both coming from the Latin meaning to search. Jesus was certainly pointing us in this direction when he counseled people to become as a little child. So understanding is not handed down. Creeds and doctrines and definitions and dogmas and opinions and teachings and writings are handed down. Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote, "There lives more faith in honest doubt than in half the creeds." He knew the benefit of a doubt. So be a seeker and a searcher. Be on a quest. All the great seekers have discovered their own map. Gautama Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tse, Socrates, Moses, Isaiah, Paul, St. Francis, St. Teresa. Each one had his or her own roadmap that can help point the way for us, but we still have to travel the road of our own illumination and understanding. We get the saying, doubting Thomas, from the disciple Thomas in the Bible, because he was a questioner. He had to ask and search and knock and probe and experiment and seek proof. He was the most scientific of the disciples. He wanted first-hand experience, and he wanted to verify and validate what is true by seeing and touching it. As was pointed out previously in the Strength program, Mahatma Gandhi called his autobiography My Experiments with Truth. The famous Greek philosopher Socrates said that the key to life was to know thyself. Jesus may have seen Thomas as the bright one who, like him, was not satisfied with hand-me-down convictions and others' beliefs. Thomas was a quester, a questioner, and when he received a confirmation, he understood and he was changed. You who are experimenting with truth, you who are searching and studying, you who are on a quest, you are not satisfied with outworn explanations or easy answers. You who feel there is a better way to live, you who don't want to repeat old negative patterns that you or your family or associates have gotten enmeshed in, you who want to have a first-hand experience, you who know that understanding is never final. May all power be given unto you as you continually search for and gain greater knowledge, illumination, and understanding. As Khalil Gibran wrote in The Prophet, "Say not, I have found the truth, but rather I have found a truth."
Understanding does not always mean that your life turns out the way you planned it. Changes can take place beyond your control. One loving father in Florida named Chris was greatly distressed when he found out the mother of his 3-year-old daughter, Amy, was moving to Philadelphia. Chris could not understand, why is this happening to me? He was all upset and all churned up inside, and he did everything possible to try to delay and prevent the move from happening, but eventually he had to say goodbye. Chris called Amy every single day to say, "I love you, and I'm here for you, Amy." For 2 years, he traveled regularly to see his little girl. He also spent considerable time working on and understanding himself, being determined to stay in a healthy recovery program, attending church, having support from friends and family. And one of the special services that he attended at his church had a time designated to write a God letter. Chris had been working daily to surrender, to understand more deeply his relationship with Spirit's will, and to find clarity in his life. And on this occasion, people had the opportunity to write a letter to God, or be the recipient or secretary or stenographer who received a letter from the higher power. Chris prayed and received and wrote a simple letter that he felt was coming from the divine. "Dear Chris, I will put Amy back into your life, living close to you again, so you can be together. Love, God." Chris then wrote his own name and address on an envelope, put the letter inside it, and sealed it. Then he put the God letter in a basket, knowing that in 6 months the church would mail it back to him at his home. Well, 3 months later, Chris had long since forgotten about the letter when Amy's mom called to say that they would be moving back to Florida. And within the next few months, Amy was back near him and was spending time regularly with her dad. Now, one day they walked hand in hand to the mailbox, and inside was a strange letter from the church with his own handwriting on the envelope. Chris opened the letter with his precious little girl by his side and read, "Dear Chris, I will put Amy back into your life, living close to you again, so you can be together. Love, God." In shock and amazement, Chris hugged his beautiful daughter and cried, realizing the power of prayer and feeling the presence of an understanding Father working in his life. Understanding often takes time, not to mention love and patience. You can see how Chris could have cursed his situation and with upset and anger churned up himself and everyone else. Instead, he turned over the situation to the higher power and worked steadily to create within himself an understanding heart.
When we have good understanding, when we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, how do our 5 physical senses work? Well, they work wonderfully. Now, how about when we are blind to our shortcomings, when we don't listen or hear what's being said to us? What happens then? Well, now we may develop some difficulties with our eyes or ears or our other physical senses. Let me tell you about a man that I'm going to call Jim. Jim was bright, intelligent, and insightful, but he had a tendency to be critical and judgmental, to think that he knew more than other people did. He was always right. And as a result, Jim felt like he did not see eye to eye with his boss about much of anything. Of course, Jim thought it was his boss who had all of the problems, when in reality, Jim was blind to his own critical and uncooperative nature. Sure enough, Jim started having some eye problems. First, it felt like he had something like grit in his eyes, although nothing was really there. And finally, he developed an infection of the lining of his right eye, which is called conjunctivitis. So he went to see his eye doctor, who gave him some medication. When Jim got home that night, he immediately picked up his personal journal, and he started reading to see if he could gain some new insight as to why he had developed this eye problem. For a couple of years in his journal, he had written down his key thoughts and ideas, things that he had read that had inspired him. He also had written as a way to work through his frustrations about his boss and other people, and he had recorded many of his dreams. Now, as he read back over the last year's entries, it became clear to him that he had been critical and judgmental, had felt superior, had not used his understanding to be helpful and cooperative and a team member. The most obvious indication of this was in two dreams. In one of them, he was talking with his boss, but he was wearing eyeglasses with very thick lenses, so thick that he could hardly see through them. And in a second dream, he was wearing glasses again, but this time they had broken lenses. Here it was, right in his dreams, the obvious symbol of his problems with seeing clearly. Once he had realized this, Jim made the necessary changes in the way that he looked at and he analyzed things at work. He had 2 long talks with his boss to clear the air and to come to a mutual understanding of how they could work better together. And then his eye symptoms disappeared. Keeping a journal is something that we all can do to help us in our self-analysis, to help us become more insightful and understanding. Recording and working with our dreams often gives us a new awareness of things that we did not consciously understand at the time that we have the dreams. When we read through several months' entries in our journal, we often see patterns that had not been clear to us previously. We have some new insight, some new comprehension about ourselves. And then, for that moment, we can say, aha, now I understand.
In exasperation, have you ever said, "Why can't you just understand me?" Well, David and I certainly have said this to one another.
We've had more than our share of difficulties understanding each other in our years of marriage and parenting 5 children.
Fortunately, we discovered a book many years ago that really helped called Please Understand Me by David Kearsey and Marilyn Bates. There's a personal inventory that you take. It's not a test, just an inventory of personality traits that are our unique ways of being in the world. And this is a simplified version of a more extensive inventory called the Myers-Briggs that can be easily taken by anyone. We simply answered a set of questions, and each of us came up with a personality inventory of ourselves.
Gaylyn's way of thinking and feeling, her aims and purposes, her values, her drives and impulses are different than mine, and that's good.
And if David doesn't want what I want, it's important that I not try to make him be wrong. He sees things differently than I do, and I need to embrace those differences. For example, I'm more outgoing or extroverted than David is.
She gets energized by being around people and is very social. Gaylyn remembers people's names, little things about everyone's family. She loves to interact and have many friendships and relationships, and I'm quieter and more inwardly directed. Now, you knew that, didn't you?
And you like to be with people, David. But after a while, I can always tell when David's ready to go home. He gets re-energized by spending quiet time alone, reading and gardening, or being with a few close friends, rather than in large gatherings for long periods of time. Now you can see how this could result in a big disagreement if we're at a large gathering and I'm just getting started when David's ready to leave. So you have to compromise. It's very important that I understand and not take it personally, that David needs his quiet times in his thoughts and in his surroundings.
Of course, both of us need to have quiet time and social time, but our preferences for the amounts are different. So we have our individual preferences in a number of areas.
That's right. David's much more the visionary. He's great at seeing the big picture. He likes to keep things open-ended, gather more information, kind of go with the flow, and see what might happen next before finalizing things. Now, this is very valuable and makes it possible for some wonderful things to emerge.
And Gaylyn is a detail person. She runs her life by her day planner. She's a list maker. She likes to make decisions, get things wrapped up, get the show on the road, make closure. Well, again, you can see how different we are. But together, we bring a unique blend of talents and skills to all that we do, as long as we make that extra effort to understand and appreciate our unique differences.
Now, saying that requires extra effort doesn't mean that David doesn't love me or that I don't love David. Yes, we are different in some ways, but we're also quite similar in other ways, such as having a strong intuition. You know, we talked about having a gut feeling, going with an inclination to act on hunches. Both of us are very imaginative and have big dreams and help serving, empowering people, and taking care of the planet. Working together with our differences and similarities helps us to achieve those dreams. So if I'm trying to make David into a copy of me, think like me, feel like me, act like me, then I'm not really using my power of understanding. I really need to listen to hear what he's saying and to see through his eyes for a moment. Understanding says, I'm not irritated or disappointed with you because you're different than I am. I don't want to change you to be like me. I embrace you as you are. I respect and even nurture our differences. This is true understanding.
I understand the importance of using all of my powers in a balanced way. Remember, muddy water let stand becomes clear. Relax, be still, and you will know what is next.
We understand it.
I understand myself and the world around me by wisely using my 5 physical senses. My understanding is never final, but is always open-minded and growing.
A questioner.
Understanding ourselves and trusting that there is a plan for our lives can lead to amazing outcomes. Understanding and respecting each other's differences lead to great friendships and long-lasting relationships.
So understanding is not in books or others' teachings or recordings that you hear or watch, as this program or this video. These can be helpful, obviously. They're guides and they're maps, but always keep in mind that the map is not the territory. If I'm looking at a map, I'm not actually taking the trip. Or if I go into a restaurant and I look at the menu, this is not the meal. It's the way to the meal, maybe. So the understanding, the truth, is not in a book. It's in you. You have the power of understanding.
We are flying high, we are making time. We love corners cut, we don't like lines. All our days are blurred and our nights are filled. There's no time left for standing still. We know what to say at the perfect time. We've been schooled to act, geared to climb. We have wheels that turn, we were made to build. We've lost the knack for standing still. An inward look in a quiet place, a loved one's touch, a child's embrace, a private prayer for the truth revealed. Let our hearts be moved towards standing